Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Preaching in the Park. I'm your host, Minister Jonathan Simmons, and we thank God for those of you who decided to tune in and watch our live broadcast this morning. Also, want to give a big shout out to those of you who are watching on the replay on Periscope or on demand on YouTube, or whichever way you are accessing the broadcast. We thank you, each and every one, for joining us. Well, you know how we do it. Each and every ministry broadcast, it always starts out with Psalms 118 and 24. This is the day that the Lord hath made. We will be glad and rejoice in it. As I tell each and every week, it is a determination that we are going to acknowledge a couple of things. Number one, we're going to acknowledge the fact that the Lord has made the day and that it is a day that we should rejoice because we're able to be in the land of the living and see it. So we are very, very thankful to that. And we thank God that we're able to do that this particular Sunday morning. It is a crisp, beautiful day outside of Atlanta where we are located. It's about maybe just under 60 degrees, probably about 60 degrees now. Temperature is supposed to go up into about the high 70s today. So again, we're very, very thankful that we were able to be here and be able to broadcasting live. Well, we're going to continue on in the book of James, and we have been in that book. That's where the Lord, I think, wants me to be, to sensibility about how to actually put what we've learned, what we're taught, what we believe into practice. That's what James is all about. It's not about talking. It's not about reading, but it's all about doing and actually implementation of the word of God in real time. And that's really what we want, because at the end of the day, if it's not real, if it's not something that we are really impacting and changing our own lives and changing the lives of others, it's kind of really a moot point. And that's, matter of fact, what James is talking about today. Let's go ahead to the scripture here. We're looking in the book of James, and we're looking at chapter number 2. And we tried with chapter number 2 last week, and it dealt with, let's kind of review here, see if we can pull it up. We dealt with James in chapter 2 last week, talking about, holding the faith of the Lord in terms of being partial. Being an individual that is looking at the things of God with partiality. So James just said, hey, we don't want to be prejudicial in the way we go about our business last week. And we also talked about, as we continued on in that, he talked about the idea that, you don't look at people based on how they look or how they are dressed. He said, that's not how we go about our business. You don't do that. He said, if you pay attention to those people that are dressed up, pay attention to those people who got money, he said, you're doing things that are against the will of God. So this week, what we want to deal with is the idea of how to take this to the next level in terms of our faith. Everybody likes to, call me or call any preacher a man of faith. Well, what does that really mean? Being a man of faith, a person of faith. What does that mean? Well, James gets to it, and he wants us to take a look at it a little differently. When we think about faith, sometimes we think about, practicing piety. And when I say piety or piety, whichever how it's pronounced, this idea of the do's and don'ts, and really a lot of emphasis on the don't. We don't use bad language. Some people say we don't drink at all. I'm just telling you some of the things that people kind of normally attach to being a person of faith, that you don't use any bad language, that you try to be nice to people all the time. And, certainly these are some of the fruits of being a person who has a faith in Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ. The good works, talks about producing good works. But at the end of the day, it's really good works has to be, in fact, work. You have to be doing something. So let's look in the book of James here, 2 and 14. This is what James says. He said, what is a prophet, my brethren, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can faith save him? Now, before we get into a theological sidebar, the idea of, are we saved by faith or by works? That's not what we're talking about here. James is now asking the question, okay, what good is it if you say you have all this faith? In other words, that you have this belief in Yeshua HaMashiach, that you are a born-again believer, that you've been changed, that the love of God is in your life, and then there's no action behind it. Okay, let's go further. James continues on in chapter 2 and goes to 3 and 4. He said, okay, let me break it down to you in real time. If a brother or sister is naked or destitute of daily food, and one of you says to that person, depart in peace, be warmed and filled, and you do not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? Thus also faith by itself, if it hath not works, is dead. See, once again, this is what I love about James. He gets right down to the real situation. He said, okay, you're talking all about this faith. You have this love of God in your hearts. He said, but a brother or sister, let's see it again. I'll keep it on the page, comes in, they're broken down. Basically, it says naked and destitute. Let's talk about this. So they don't have any clothes. They are despondent, due to their current situation. And they don't have even 3 square meal. They don't have food to eat. And so now they found themselves in the house of God, or found themselves at your doorstep, whichever it may apply. And now we have a situation where the Bible is telling us that if we have faith, we can't just say to them, hey, good luck, be filled, be warm, be warm. And I pray that God makes a way and it sends them on their way if we have what they need at our disposal. You see, a lot of times we will send people away, and I've done it. I'm not going to lie, I've done it, especially a lot of times when I see people on the street, because I think what happens a lot of times is that we're so worried about being defrauded. We're so worried about the person going to take the money and spend it on drugs or whatever. Or sometimes they look a little unsafe and we think they might try to bum rush us. We've heard stories of Good Samaritans being attacked, or, very rarely, but sometimes even getting killed for trying to do the right thing. So the fear factor arises in us, and so we don't help them. Well, like I said, in the church, we've heard stories of people coming in and, they weren't given things because they were questioned by the ministry. Do you tithe? They were checked to see how much offering they put in before the people were given money or certain things they need. Now, these are rare examples, but I'm saying these are examples of what James is talking about. We have to be careful. We have to be careful that if someone comes in, especially a brother or sister, so a brother or sister is really kind of indicating a fellow believer, someone that I'm pretty sure they're a child of God. They come in and they have needs. We have the ability to take care of those needs, and we pawn it off. We pawn it off on the government. We pawn it off on anybody and everybody so that we don't do it ourselves. God said, okay, well, James is saying, all right, if you do that, okay, let's go back to it again. James 2:15-17. He said, but you do not give them the things which are needed for the body. In other words, not just the spiritual stuff, not just a prayer, not just laying on hands. He said, thus also, what does it profit? What good is it? He said, thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. What is James saying? He said, if your faith is not producing an action, then what good is it? This is what the Lord has been really dealing with me on these as we move towards these latter days. This can't be something we just talk or teach or preach. It has to be implemented in action. And that's why I thank God that even the church I go to at House of Hope, the church ain't perfect, but the bottom line, they are constantly, no church is perfect for that matter, they're constantly trying to give to people in real time. And that's one of the reasons why the congregation has grown. Obviously, the great preaching of the pastor, E. Dewey Smith, a young guy, kind of out of the box. But the bottom line is that he's always tried to implement what he's teaching and preaching and passing it on to the ministries and to the lay people to actually do that. He does it himself, but actually to do that. Let's have a spot where we can have on Saturday where people can come up and pick up boxes of food during this pandemic. Let's have a situation where we partner with people to help attack the problem of human trafficking. Let's actually put money and dollars and resources and people to help that. Okay, let's try to find ways that we can partner to help people get rental assistance. Or this church in Detroit where the pastor went into the neighborhood that he was in. Okay, neighborhood he was in. He goes somewhere else. The neighborhood he was in, poor neighborhood, and saw all these houses that have been foreclosed and abandoned. And he began to buy them up one by one. And then what he would in turn do is that he would let his congregation members rent them at a price where they could afford. Real affordable housing, not just the idea of like they do sometimes in major cities where they kind of take a look at this number that they deem to be affordable. And when you find out it's affordable for people who are still not technically poor. See, the poor in many places don't have housing. That's why we have so much homeless people. There's no real housing. There's no, in so many cities, they have gotten rid of the housing authorities, which used to be kind of the safety net. Why? Because unlike when I was a child, when you lived in a housing authority, if you got any government assistance, it used to be monitored. You had a social worker that would come by periodically and check out the state of the children, check out the state and the cleanliness of the home. And if there was a problem, the parent, the mother, in most cases, had to address that problem, or her ability to take care of her children, the income, was in jeopardy. There was an accountability factor. But the biggest thing is that it was there for the people. Now they don't have it. But again, it gets down to the individual believer. If we are not examples of the love of God, if we're not putting this out so people can see God in real time, then we're wasting our time. One of the reasons why there's a lot of young people, this new generation, so to speak, of don't go to church, is because they ain't feeling the love. They're just not. They're not feeling the love. They're not. It's all about looking at what they have on, how they act, how they talk. And we put so much stress on that, looking at that we basically make it to some degree, in some churches, it's almost a hostile place for the non-believer to come in. We've become, I raise my hand, we've all become very judgmental. Why? Because we have been delivered from these things. In some cases, many years ago, the Lord took us out of drunkenness. He took us out of drug addiction. He took us out of whoring around, sleeping around. He took us out of lying and cheating and stealing. He took us out of these habitual things that we did, these sins that had bound us and put us in a place that, put us really in many cases on the edge of society. He took us from being the dregs, the garbage pit, and he cleaned us up. And now in many cases put us in high places, and what we have forgotten from whence we have come. And so when people come in looking, in many cases, the way we look, now, in our cases, a lot of time we fronted. That's how we were on the inside, but on the outside, we look clean. These people, a lot of people that come in now, they put out there, they're not clean the inside or the outside. And so we have a tendency to look down on people and make them feel uncomfortable when they're coming into the house of faith. We ask people a gazillion questions when they ask us, or even sometimes they don't ask us when they need it. Instead of you doing things with discretion, maybe passing on the money to a third party that is reliable, that they will pass the money on, that you can give the money anonymously sometimes, because sometimes people don't want you to know their business. That's okay. Or the clothing. I know myself. That's one thing I got to do. I got so many clothes that even people gave me. I got to pass it along now. Give it to other people. Oh, by the way, if you know somebody that's, I said maybe about a 44 long, 42 long, or even regular that needs a sport coat, that needs, some ties, let me know. Let me know. I'm going to put it up here right now for those of you who can see it. You can contact me at 678-304-8121, or you can send me an email at helpchurches@gmail.com. I got plenty of clothes. So if you got a man out there, young or old, they're stylish. I ain't putting no old jacked up garments. You know how we do. So I get you looking right. But I got plenty of, like I said, sport coats and ties. I might have a couple of shirts, but definitely sport coats and ties available. If you have a man in your house, whatever age, let me know and we'll get that to you. But that's what James is saying. James is saying to us today, he was saying to the church at that time, that in order for us to really be members of the ecclesia, and that's the Greek word for church, which really basically means the called out ones. Okay, if we're supposed to be the called out ones, called out what? To implement the purpose of God, then we got to be about it. Because see, if we're always talking about it, if we're preaching about it, if we're singing about it, but then not implementing, then in essence, James is saying that this is dead. And this concept of helping people, I always like to go back to this for those of you who are like, kind of like, well, what does this have to do with the Old Testament? See, God has a thread of consistency that goes throughout that whole Bible. Let's go back and look into Deuteronomy, the 10th chapter. And I got it up here on the screen for you guys are looking there with me. And this is Deuteronomy, it's Old Testament now. It says, "For the Lord your God is a God of gods, Lord of lords, the great God, mighty and awesome, who shows no partiality nor takes a bribe." Okay, so there's nothing going on there with God. And then here's the next and best part here. He says, "He administers justice for the fatherless and the widow and loves the stranger, giving him food and clothing." So now, if we are supposed to be children of God, we call ourselves the children of God, then the children should imitate their parents. There should be a DNA stamp that's clearly visible to all that see you. If you look at my daughter, there's no doubt in your mind when you see her, say, "Oh yeah, that's Simmons' daughter right there. That's Jonathan's daughter," because she looks like me, and in some cases she acts like me. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, but that's another story. Her demeanor, a lot of her sensibilities are like me. Why? Because she's my daughter. My DNA stamp is in her. So therefore, we as people of God, the DNA stamp is in us. And how does that work with us spiritually? The Bible lets us know that any person that becomes a follower of Yeshua HaMashiach has the DNA stamp of God in them. And how does that work? Because the Holy Spirit is given to all of us who are believers. That's our DNA stamp. It actually overlays the DNA of God on top of our DNA in the spiritual sense. So we should be producing fruits of good work. The Lord has an expectation. Remember, you heard me talk about that last week. He got an expectation that if he's planted a vineyard, he's expecting to come to the vineyard and get some fruit. Okay, he's not coming to the vineyard expecting to find some shrubbery. He's not expecting to find some sticks. He's expecting to find fruit. If he planted a vineyard, the natural inclination is to think, "I'm gonna get some grapes up out of here." Same thing with us. So again, James is reminding us, let's make this real now. Let's get back to really making the Christian experience, following Yeshua HaMashiach, come alive. Okay, let's begin to show the love of Christ everywhere we go. Let's begin to love people as they are, where they are. And let us begin to pray for one another, because that's what Paul said. Paul said to the people, he said, "Look, you pray for me." Paul was always praying for the people, but he asked the people to pray for him. And I'm going to ask you, those of you listening, to pray for me. Pray that I might be a true servant of God, not just in terms of what the do's and don'ts, but in terms of the emphasis on the do's. Give me that, ask God for me in my behalf. Pray for the preacher that I might have more courage, that I might be more emboldened to preach and teach the gospel, and to begin to give to people, to make myself available to people who don't need me, but who need the love of God manifested through me. Help me to be a better conduit of the love of God. Help me to be a better ambassador for Mashiach, an ambassador for Christ. Help me to be a better spokesperson for Yeshua, for Jesus. Help me to do a better job of showing the love, of being tender and kind and patient and compassionate towards people. Pray that I might do a better job, because if the preacher can't get it done, then we all in trouble. That's why I told people when I had a situation where I had to get my operations done, that's the one thing I told people. I said, "Look here, man," I said, if I can't go through this operation, and if I can't come out with thanksgiving, if I can't come out with some courage, okay, now the trouble has hit my door, then we're in trouble. Because what good is that faith if the man, the man or woman of God who are supposed to be the teachers of faith, if they fold under pressure? I'm just being real now. Okay, so that's what I ask y'all to really do for me. Pray that I might be better. Like I said, when I came out of the hospital, I said I want to be more, better, better. And that's the truth. I want to be better. I want to be a better man. I want to be a better preacher of the gospel. But more importantly, I want to be a better child of God. I want to be a better ambassador for Christ. That's really what I really want to do. I want to do a better job of that, because I think if I can do that, that will lead people to Christ. It's not for me. It's not for me to be elevated, but it's that I might do a better job of showing people Christ and showing His love. That might be a better witness to His goodness and greatness, and that people might see that, and that they might be drawn to that and be saved. Because really, that's the end game. All this other stuff that we do is good and important, but we want to really make sure that people come to that relationship with God through Jesus Christ, repenting of their sins, believing that Jesus died for them. What does it mean by that? That once He died on the cross, that all of their sins, past, present, and future, now are forgiven, if they in fact believe that He came here, died on that cross, and was risen from the dead. That in fact, that's the only thing they have to do to have a relationship with God. That's the only thing they have to do in order to move from someone who's a stranger, someone who's not connected, someone who has to think about, well, can I go to God directly in prayer, and move beyond that to a new and glorious situation where now, as you hear me say at the end of every broadcast, they now become I have become, if you're a believer. If you're not a believer, you can now become two things. One, a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. Right now, you got to wait to get to heaven. You can become a citizen right now. And you also become an adopted child of God. And when you really think about those two things, I mean, how mind-boggling is that no matter what kind of mischief, what kind of miscreant you are, I don't care what you're doing. I don't care if you listen to this broadcast laid up with somebody that's not your wife or not your husband. I don't care if you're coming out of the stupor of drunkenness. I don't care if you're in the haze or some type of various narcotic. The bottom line is God will take you from right there and He will turn your life into something magnificent. I don't care if people don't like you. I don't care if you broke, busted, can't be trusted. I don't care about any of that. And neither does God, because what God will do is He will take you, just like He took me and millions and billions of other people, from their despair into deliverance. They will go from a place of being down and out to a place where they have been elevated, put back on their feet, and now are a productive citizen, not only of the kingdom of God, but a productive citizen in the world, the natural. Because the other thing I just want to inform you before I get off this broadcast is that when you become a citizen of the kingdom of heaven, Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is at hand. In other words, you can operate in the kingdom principles right here upon the earth before you even get to heaven. Now, I'm not going to tell you life is perfect, because it ain't, because part of this citizenry is like anything else. There are difficulties. Matter of fact, sometimes even more difficulties once you become a citizen, because of your great enemy, which is the devil, who is seeking to destroy, to kill, to damage, to slow down, to disrupt anything that is good, anything that is of God. So the blessing is going to come. You're going to have a life well lived. But at the end of the day, it's going to be with some difficulty. And the other thing, too, is, which I have to learn over and over again, that, in fact, you are going to be tempted, sometimes tempted up almost beyond measure. But the good news is that if you go to God, God will deliver you even from temptation. And don't flip out, because the Bible even indicates that temptation is a normal thing. That's sometimes something I have to deal with. Anyway, we're about to wrap up. I can't get into that right now. I'll talk about that in another broadcast. But I mean, sometimes I'll be like, why I got to go through this? I don't want to deal with this. Well, you got to get over yourself because it's part of living. And that's why it's important. That's why James talks about constantly that our faith has to be put into action. And what we talked about today is that faith being put into action regarding other people. We'll get in other broadcasts where how faith is important to put in action in our own lives. But I'm going to close it out again here with James 15 through 17. He said, a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you says to them, depart in peace, be warmed and filled, but you do not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? Thus also faith by itself, if it hath not works, is dead. That's where a lot of people get the saying that that we can be so spiritually minded that we be no earthly good. Now, I always felt that kind of really is not correct, because technically speaking, the more spiritually minded you are, the more earthly good you will do, because the things of the spirit tend to life. But that's where we get that sensibility from, that somehow you so much in the clouds, you're so much in the theory of heaven, so much in the theory of the love of God that you don't actually apply it in real time. And we ain't about no theory, we're about application. All right, speaking of application, I'm going to ask you again, for those of you who don't know Jesus Christ, you don't know God, you don't have that personal relationship with him, I got an answer for you. You need to get to know him through having a relationship with his son, Jesus, who is the Christ, mighty Yeshua HaMashiach. Why? Because as I tell you every week, nobody loves you like Jesus. Nobody loves you like Yeshua HaMashiach. Not your mama, not your grandmama, not your auntie and them, not your bae, not your boo, not your ride and die, not your partner, not your boy, not your girl, not any of those folks that are very close to you. Jesus said, I'm closer even than that. Why? Because first of all, he made us. And the Bible said, not we ourselves. And number two, he came here, took off all of his heavenly garments and came here, still being God, but now operating as a man, dealt with all the stuff we got to deal with, all of it, family issues, people issues, all that stuff. But he sinned not. And then he did the ultimate. He took himself and allowed himself to be nailed up on the cross, a horrific death for us as the one-time atonement for the sins of everybody. Man, woman, boy, child, and girl, I don't care where you're from. And so that now, if you believe that he did that, if you believe that he came, lived this sinless life, died on the cross, but then more importantly, rose from the dead, that you now have become a citizen of heaven, number one, as I mentioned earlier, and you become an adopted child of God, and you have all the rights therein. And what that means is that now you can operate understanding that God is actually hearing your prayer. And not only hearing your prayer, but he will answer your prayer. And number two, he will give you and out of the desires of our heart according to his will. How cool is that? And that oftentimes in life, when we have difficulties, you will find that he puts his super on top of our natural, and bam, supernatural intervention happens and something marvelous happens in our lives. And then last but not least, but the more important thing is that when we die, or when most of us die, because some people ain't going to die. That's a whole nother story. But when we die, we now actually have a new home to go to, a place called heaven, the ultimate paradise. Okay, a place where there's no pain, no pandemic, no bad people, no protests, nothing negative of any type, no darkness. You said no darkness at all? Nope, no nighttime. Why? Because God himself and Yeshua are right there, and they are so bright in their luminance and glory, there's never nighttime. There's no need for sun because they're brighter than the sun. And we get a chance to reconnect with all of our loved ones who went on before us, and we get a chance to meet all of the people we read about in the Bible. But more importantly, we get to see Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus, who is our Savior, face to face. And we avoid going to that other place, which is the opposite of heaven, where there's darkness, where there's gloom, where there's bad people, where there's pain all the time. And most of all, we're disconnected from God. Now, I don't know about you, but I like option number one and not option number two. Listen, guys, like I say, if you want to contact me, you can check us out. We have a website, considerthewordministries.org. You can follow me anywhere on social media at Minister J. Sim. You can shoot me an email at helpchurches@gmail.com, or you can call the office number 678-304-8121, and we would love to correspond with you in person. All right, everybody, until the next time, God bless you and have a great day.